For the bed is too short to stretch out on, and the blanket too narrow to wrap up in. Hello everybody, this is Gilgamesh, and this is the third section of Isaiah chapter 28. We had previous sections that discussed the drunkards of Ephraim, verses 1 through 8, as well as teaching of children, verses 9 through 13. Here, verses 14 through 22, we're going to talk about the scoffers and the foundation stone, some very famous verses in Isaiah. And then on our next episode, we will talk about verses 23 through 29, which is a section about growing certain types of crops. In this section on the scoffers, we started out here in verse 14. Therefore hear the word of the Lord, you scoffers, who rule this people in Jerusalem. So we have immediately set our location here as Jerusalem. Unlike the beginning where we started talking about the northern kingdom, we are now clearly talking about Jerusalem here. The idea of scoffers makes a very distinctive start and end to this section. It's not a very common word that we have here that's translated as scoffers. The word is latzon, but it occurs in closely related forms at both the beginning and end of this section. Going to verse 15, it says, because you have said, we have made a covenant with death, and with Sheol we have an agreement. When the overwhelming whip passes through, it will not come to us. For we have made lies our refuge, and in falsehood we have taken shelter. So, very dramatic here. There seems to be some type of a conspiracy going on, a covenant with death. And we had some hints of this back in Isaiah chapter 22, where we talked about Shebna, who was the overseer of the house, who was making himself a beautiful tomb. And perhaps this is riffing on that same idea, that there are people here who have made some covenant with death, some agreement with Sheol. With Sheol, we have an agreement. The word here that's translated as agreement with Sheol is actually Hoseh. And Hoseh actually means a vision. This might be that they're saying that they have a seer or a prophet who is being able to deal with Sheol, some sort of a necromancer, essentially. But yes, this seems to be that they are rejecting the Lord and his prophets, and they have instead made a covenant, the same thing that you do with the Lord that's so important. They have made it with Mavet, with death, and they have made a Hoseh, a seer, possibly a vision, but probably like a seer, with Sheol, with hell itself. Mavet, of course, is the Canaanite god of death, as well as just being the word for death. Some people understand that this may be a reference to the part of Jerusalem that promoted an alliance with Egypt because they had a fairly expansive cult of the dead in Egypt, and that this was something they looked to as a defense against Assyria. And so Isaiah may be talking about those who would rely on Egypt as these that have made a covenant with death. It's possible, but it seems more likely that Isaiah is just generally saying that these people have given up on God and sort of have embraced this nihilistic idea of death coming for them, imagining that they somehow will be safe from all the dangers that are coming through the covenants they have made with these underworld deities. So there seems to be some sort of a secret conspiracy or a secret combination of some sort that is going on here with the deity of the netherworld. And this seems to be a group that's out here saying that they are welcoming their new Assyrian overlords, perhaps. It sounds like Isaiah is describing traitors. And then he talks about this whip passing over them, that they're going to be okay through. And this does sound a little like they are embracing the invaders when they say that the whip isn't going to hit them. The overwhelming whip here is this very interesting Hebrew phrase, shot shotef. They very much is a sound play there. Shot is this word for a whip, a scourge, a whip that brings death very suddenly. It can possibly mean a flood of water, but then the shotef that follows it, very similar word, they just like add an extra syllable on the end here, means to wash away or to overcome, to gush, to pour down. And the idea here is that maybe this is referencing the mighty rivers of Assyria that are going to wash through the land, which is something that Isaiah has used as imagery several times. Or perhaps this is a powerful whip that's going to be hitting them, that is going to just simply knock them out of their place. But we have this overwhelming whip, this overwhelming scourge, or perhaps this overflowing flood that is going to cross through their land. But they say that it's not going to come to them, for they have placed lies as a refuge. Now, there is this idea of a weak structure, a refuge or a shelter that these people have made, that as these floods come through, will be washed away. Whereas the righteous are told to lay a sure foundation on a building that will not topple. Now, you may feel that this is an imagery that is reused elsewhere, and you'd be right. But we have here the idea that they are making lies as a shelter and a refuge here, a flimsy structure that they're going to hide behind, and this is going to protect them from the coming whip that is going to hit them. And we have here a contrast to that starts in verse 16. It says, "Therefore thus saith the Master Lord, here am I, the one who has laid as a foundation in Zion a stone, a tested stone, a precious cornerstone, a foundation. Whoever believes will not give way, and I will make justice the line and righteousness the plumb line." So he starts it out with this, here am I, or behold me, he, me. Here, take a look at me, focus on me, is what he's saying. Laying the cornerstone in Zion, laying the foundation stone in Zion. And it's a very interesting, somewhat repetitive thing here, where he says first a stone, then he gives it a tested stone, and then he gives it the precious cornerstone, and he calls it a musad, foundation. An interesting repetition there for emphasis. And he says that whoever believes, whoever trusts in this foundation stone, will not give way. Now, this last word here is a little bit interesting. The word here is yahish, and we're not completely sure what it means here. Some people do associate it with the word to make haste, but that doesn't make a lot of sense. Why would people who trust in the cornerstone not be in a hurry? The Septuagint and other old translations support the idea of this word meaning to not be afraid. But given the emphasis on building and masonry, I believe that Driver has it correct when he translates it as will not give way. Whoever believes is not going to have their building fall down. I think that is the correct meaning of this word. And we have justice and righteousness. The Hebrew words here are mishpat and tzedakah. These are two recurring themes in Isaiah. Here we have this perfect cornerstone, and it is tested against a right angle or a square, so that we can make sure that it is exact, that it is able to bear the load that it is going to have. It represents the honor of the people here, that justice is placed to the kav, to the line, the same word that we saw in that child's rhyme just a few verses ago, that justice is going to be for the line here. And so your idea of the equality of your citizenry, the caring for the poor and the weak of your society, is what makes one side of this perfect building stone to have the strength and the exactness it needs to stand. And the other line is tzedakah, righteousness. That is the other leg of this square here, and any deviation from that would cause the wall or the building that you're building to topple. And so this perfect ashlar becomes then the perfect foundation to build a building on. The building in mind is probably almost certainly the temple. And so we are talking about here this foundation for Zion, this chief cornerstone that Zion will be built on, is going to be built on justice and righteousness. And what will happen when the storm comes? Well, we go to our next lines here. And hail will sweep away the refuge of lies, and waters will overwhelm the shelter. So the refuge and the shelter that those who made their covenants with Mavet and with Sheol, they are going to have their buildings swept away. Then your covenant with death will be annulled, and your agreement with Sheol will not stand. And so we have the idea here of not standing, again seeming to refer to the idea of this building that will topple or fall. When the overwhelming scourge passes through, you will be trampled down by it. And so we have here again this idea of maybe this overwhelming whip or maybe this overwhelming flood. As it passes through, you're going to be trampled to the earth. And being trampled to the earth does make it sound more like a military type thing than a flood. And so perhaps both metaphors are meant with this. Isaiah does like to have words with multiple meaning. It wouldn't surprise me if he had both meanings in mind. But as it passes through, they're going to be trampled down. Their refuge is going to be just trampled into the mud. As often as it passes through, it will take you. For morning by morning it will pass through, by day and by night, and it will be sheer terror to understand the message. And so we have here the idea that it's going to be a terrible thing, and we come back to the idea of the message. And so we may be linking this in some ways to the previous section where it asked, who's going to understand the message? And this is going to be a sheer terror to these people to understand what is supposed to be heard. And I love the verse 20 here, one of my favorite verses in Isaiah. For the bed is too short to stretch on, and the blanket is too narrow to wrap up in. It reminds me of a scene in Dead Poets Society.
Mumbling truth. Truth like a blanket that always leaves your feet cold. You push it, stretch it, it'll never be enough. You kick at it, beat it, it'll never cover any of us.
There's no way to stretch it to the length you need. The crooked cannot be made straight. There's no way to heal injustice. There must be something from beyond, something to make it all right, an answer to the problem that can make these things correct. It is beyond human ability to bring things to the point that it needs to be. And what is that solution? Well, we have it in verse 21. For the Lord will rise up as on Mount Perazim, as in the valley of Gibeon he will be roused, to do his deed, strange is his deed, and to work his work, alien is his work. Mount Perazim and Gibeon Valley, these are places of victory, respectively for David and for Joshua, where God intervened on their behalf. He's now going to intervene in history on behalf of his people to deter this dire consequence which is coming upon them. The strange and alien work reminds us a little bit of the stammering and foreign tongue that he said he was going to teach with. And we end it here with our reference to scoffing in verse 22. Now, therefore, do not scoff, lest your bonds be made strong. For I have heard a decree of destruction from the Master, Lord of hosts, against the whole land. So this seems to be Isaiah here coming back in to tell them to stop the scoffing, the mocking, or you're going to be in very strong bonds. You will be in bondage beyond what you can understand, because destruction is coming across the whole land. And so if you have these simple refuges and shelters, they will be overwhelmed and trodden down as it comes through. Instead, there is a foundation stone, a sure stone, a perfect building ashlar that you can build your temple upon. And that is where you must be if you wish to survive the scourge. And that seems to be Isaiah's message in this part. And I'll leave you with that. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. And let's see how this chapter ends up in the next episode.